Today. I'd like to start with some basics about Israel, take a quick look at what happened between 1948 and modern day Israel, and then focus on some current issues and events. We'll address the significance of Israel relating to God's timetable, His covenants, and the call of Israel, including their legal right to Jerusalem and the land according to the Bible. We'll look at a ton of facts and statistics, and then talk about what we can do as Christians. Being a Christian doesn't mean to say that you're always pro-Israel, but I would really like to start with just asking the question, were you aware of the fact that there has been a Jewish presence in the land of Israel and in the Middle East for more than 3,000 years? Now, the Arabs were offered their own state side by side Israel in 1948 by the United Nations Partition Plan. This offer was rejected by the Arabs living in Palestine, which was the name of the land given by the Romans in 70 AD. Now, pay close attention to this, because this is the reason for all of the refugees today. Anticipating and knowing that the newfound state of Israel was going to be attacked by Arab neighbors, Arabs living there began to leave, fully expecting to return after the Arab victory. Meanwhile, Jewish leaders urged the Arabs to remain in Palestine and become citizens of the new Israel. May the 14th, 1948, Israel declares itself a state, which was fully sanctioned by the United Nations. The new name for Palestine is now Israel. The very next day, on May the 15th, 1948, was followed by attacks from all sides from 5 different Arab countries in what is now known as the Israel War of Independence. More Jews were expelled from Arab nations through anti-Semitism than Arabs were displaced from Israeli territory. All of the Jews that were displaced from Arab countries were assimilated into Israel. The Arabs that refused to stay and become citizens of Israel now became refugees. Their own Arab neighboring countries refusing to assist or assimilate them. There were approximately 650,000, and now, today, that number has grown to about 5 million. It's the only time in history that refugee status has been passed down from children to grandchildren. The Romans named the land Palestine after the Jewish enemy, the Philistines. Just as a side note, there isn't any letter P or sound of P in the Arabic language. After May the 14th, the land known as Palestine, where there was always a Jewish presence, was called Israel. Now, Arafat popularized the term Palestinian to refer only to Arabs, whereas before the term applied to anyone living in the land of Palestine. More worldwide aid has gone into the Palestinian cause than any other cause in history. Now, where has all that money gone? Arafat's personal nest egg has been estimated at between $1 to $3 billion. Incredible. Over the past 4 years, the PA has managed to lose nearly $3 billion in financial aid from Europe. I believe it's safe for us to assume that the financial aid meant for the Palestinians is not reaching the source intended. Now let's look at some basic facts about Israel. Israel is smaller than New Jersey and is 2/3 the size of Vancouver Island. The word Israel can't even fit on the map. North to south, Israel is 263 miles, and the width is between 9 and 71 miles from east to west. Israel can fit into Florida 8 times. The population of Israel, it's just over 8 million people now. 75% are Jewish, 21% are Arab, and 4% are other. The official language is Hebrew and Arabic, very similar to us here in Canada, where we have English and French. Total worldwide population of Jews is 13.9 million. 380,000 live in Canada and 5.5 million in the United States. 13.8 million Jews worldwide compared to 1.5 billion Muslims. Israel's neighborhood. Well, Israel is the only democracy in the whole Middle East. The combined land size of Arab countries is 650 times the size of Israel. As we noted earlier, Israel is two-thirds the size of Vancouver Island. Arab countries are the size of the United States, Central America, and Mexico combined. That's a sobering picture, isn't it? When you hear Israel being criticized for defending their borders, remember this picture, and it will give you a different perspective, I think. Now, this next slide is very important. To be pro-Israel is not to be anti-Muslim. Let's just look at the facts, okay? Let's start with Israel's wars. In the first column, you'll see the conflict in the year. In the second column, you'll see the combatants. In the third column, you'll see those they fought against. And in the fourth column, you'll see who had victory. Each time Israel has had to defend herself in each of these wars, each time she's been the victor. This little startup nation, this tiny little place, makes me think of the following cartoon. But for God. Now let's take a look at Israel's attempts at peace. In 1947, we had the UN partition plan. The answer? No. In 1967, after the Six-Day War, whereby they defended themselves against Arab attack, Israel offered to make a peace treaty, and no was said again. In the year 2000, Barak offered 90% of the West Bank and half of the old city of Jerusalem. The answer, no, and the second intifada started. Intifada is an Arabic word which means shaking off. It's now translated into English as uprising or resistance. In 2005, Sharon withdrew from Gaza. Numerous bomb attacks, gunfire, rocket attacks, and targeted killings have happened since then. In 2008, Olmert offered the Palestinians a sovereign state, but again, no was said. Over and over, Israel has worked and tried to obtain peace. They finally came to an agreement with Egypt on a peace accord in 1978, but it really hasn't worked anywhere else. Have you heard of the term land for peace? Well, now let's take a look at Gaza. In 2005, Ariel Sharon called for the unilateral disengagement from the Gaza Strip, causing 8,000 Jewish settlers from 24 communities to be removed from their homes, places of worship, businesses, and so on. They were finally out of there by August 2005. Now, just as a side note, 4 months later, Prime Minister Sharon suffered a stroke at the age of 77, and 1 month later he became comatose for the following 8 years until his death on January the 11th, 2014. The picture here on the left displays the fertile greenhouses run by those Israeli settlers in Gaza that provided employment for thousands of Palestinians up until 2005. When they were removed, they left everything that they had worked years to create. The picture to the right and below displays its death. All of the copper piping used for drip irrigation was ripped out for quick money, leaving the greenhouses desolate and used finally as the entrance to a tunnel that was used for arms smuggling. Of course, the Israelis discovered it. Now, let's take a look at one of Gaza's summer camps. It's very chilling when you take a look at this because it looks at the fact that some young boys, 6 years old, are being trained in terrorism, up to 10,000 at a time. Children in Palestine are taught hate from the very, very beginning, like from preschool age. I couldn't download the video, but what they're being taught is a poem that talks about, it goes, "O sons of Zion, O most evil creations, O barbaric monkeys, wretched pigs, Jerusalem vomits from within it your impurity." When Israeli settlers moved out, Hamas was elected controlling Gaza, and now they use that whole territory to launch rockets and missiles at Israel, about 10,000 since 2005. The map on the right shows the range of that potential attack. 40% of Israel's population live under the threat. I want to show you a short video that will give you a truer picture of what it's like to live under that threat. The photo on the left is of a local bomb shelter in Sderot, and the map to the right shows just how close Sderot is to Gaza. Since January the 1st, 2014, there have been 110 rockets fired from Gaza. And that's just over 3 months from the time of which I'm recording this webinar. So if you just bear with me for a few minutes, I'm going to just exit out of where I am right now and try my best to upload the YouTube video so you can watch it. בוקר, מה אתה יכול לספר לי על הפעילות? שעשו אותם. ואיך היה היום? אתה יכול לספר מה היה? היה תחלילות. It's a pretty sobering picture, isn't it? When you hear and you see that. The first time I saw that video, I was so upset. Um, it just made me want to cry. I can't tell you how upset I was when I saw that. Anyways, moving along because we have more to discuss in this webinar. I just have to find out where I am here. Ah, there we are. I'll move along now because I do want to state very emphatically for you to know that to be pro-Israel is not to be against the Arabs and the Muslims. One of the things that we really need to take a look at here is the fact that we are looking at facts. Facts are important, and I believe as Christians we need to be informed. I alluded earlier to some of the poetry that the little children are being taught in Palestine. If you go to a website called the Palestinian Media Watch, you would understand a little bit more about what's being taught to all of the people there, not just the children. This particular slide indicates some of the stuff that they're hearing and they're getting. This is called the Palestinian Mickey Mouse, and you would just have to Google this to understand what they're getting. They're being taught to hate. They're being taught that the Israelis are evil, that the Israelis have martyred the Hamas Mickey Mouse. I mean, it just kind of goes on and on. I honestly believe that how suicide bombers get groomed is right from their early childhood. And the Palestinians have got a very effective campaign going on. One of the other things they do is they've eliminated Israel from their maps, from their school books, from of their information. They continually talk about the cities of Israel as if they belong to the Palestinians. And I believe that even here in Canada, the Christian Middle Eastern Center in Vancouver has a map like this that does not have Israel on it. It's pretty interesting, isn't it? Now, the number of terrorist attacks by Israelis or Jews since 1967, well, there's been 6. The number of terrorist attacks on Israel, let alone other parts in the world, by Arabs and Muslim terrorists, well, take a look at this chart and take a special look at the numbers after 2001 when the Second Intifada started. You see how they start to decline a little bit later on? Well, that is after the security fence was built. They call it the wall, and no one likes it, really. Nobody does. But you have to understand when you see the numbers that it is working. Some more facts. There are 22 Arab states to 1 Jewish state. Jerusalem is referred to 700 times in the Old Testament. In the Quran, not at all. In fact, Jews pray all around the world facing Jerusalem. Muslims pray with their backs towards Jerusalem. Now, the sole legal distinction between Arab and Jewish citizens in Israel is that Arabs do not have to serve in the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force. Israeli males, it is compulsory for them to serve 3 years, and females just under 2 years. And take a note, IDF, Israeli Defense Force, well, ever since the birth of the nation, they've literally had to defend itself. I mentioned Israel earlier, but it's worth reiterating. Arabs were advised by Arab countries to flee Israel in 1947 because it was only going to be temporary and then they could return home. Israeli leadership encouraged them to stay and offered them citizenship in the new land of Israel. They were the original refugees who their Arab countries refused to assimilate or to provide them with status. Jews had to flee all surrounding Arab countries because of extreme anti-Semitism, and they were all assimilated back into Israel. Another thing we need to look at in terms of facts, and that is about honor killings. The number of Muslim women who are killed by their fathers and brothers annually, it's staggering. Over 5,000 since 2000, the year 2000. And this is from the United Nations. There are no honor killings by Jews. In fact, they honor women. And in more Orthodox homes, the man blesses the woman every Shabbat. You see women holding high positions politically, educationally, and in business in Israel. If you have the opportunity to visit Israel, you will see people of different faiths freely visiting all of the places of worship and the holy sites. This was not allowed under Jordanian rule, but under Israeli rule, all Muslim and Christian sites are preserved and made accessible. In fact, you will hear the Muslim call to prayer 5 times a day, all over Jerusalem. It was very startling to me the first time I went. I was wondering, what is that? Well, that's what it is, and it's broadcast on loudspeakers everywhere. The number of Christian and Jewish prayer services allowed in Saudi Arabia, well, 0. And as I've just stated, Muslim prayer services are unlimited in Israel. The number of Arabs allowed to live freely in Israel, over 1 million. And Israel is called the apartheid state? How so, when Israeli Arabs have the same rights as Jewish citizens? Oh yes, except for the one, as mentioned earlier, they do not have to serve in the IDF. They can if they like, but they're not obligated to. Currently, there are 12 Arab ministers who are members of the Israeli parliament called the Knesset. Women in the Knesset? Well, there are 27. Meanwhile, women in Saudi Arabia cannot drive a car, they can't get a driver's license. They're not allowed to study in an institution of higher education. They need permission from male custodians to marry, travel outside the country, or receive medical treatment. And it is permitted for a woman to be beaten by her husband under Sharia law if she's disobedient to him. Meanwhile, Golda Meir was Israel's first woman prime minister, and in fact, she was the third woman prime minister in the world. Settlements are disputed territory. They're not illegal, and they only make up 2% of the West Bank. The Oslo Agreement allowed for settlement growth, and Jerusalem is not a settlement. I took this photo recently when I was in Israel, and as you can see clearly the security fence, what it looks like, it's up there on the right-hand side. This is a checkpoint where we were on our way into one of the settlement areas that is close to Jerusalem. This is a fact of life, and it does provide security for the people living here. You see the apartment building just beyond the fence. Well, what that does is it stops people from being able to shoot people over the down on the highway, which when I was there in 2001, we actually experienced that. So I think the security fence is pretty effective, even though the checkpoints and so forth, they're not really great for the people who live there. So, have you had enough facts yet? Really? Maybe we should move on and talk a little bit about Christian support for Israel for a bit. Why should Christians support Israel? I could give you my opinion, but it might be better if we just kind of stick with God's word. We have several 3-hour teachings on this particular topic. So for my purposes today, I'm only going to provide highlights over the next few minutes, and we'll take a look at what God has to say. Let's start with the call of Israel. In Ephesians 1:4 and 5, it says, just as he chose us in him before the foundations of the world, that we should be holy and without blame before him in love, having predestined us to adoption as sons by Jesus Christ to himself, according to the good pleasure of his will. Well, there is no Old Testament God and no New Testament God. God did not choose Abraham and David and Israel only to then change his mind and choose the church. You know that, don't you? He did not have an initial plan that failed. Jesus is not plan B. He has had one plan from the beginning of the world. He wasn't surprised by Israel's sin, nor is he surprised by our sin. The battle for understanding Israel is the battle to understand that God is God, and he will choose who he will choose, and that he wants to accomplish what he wants to accomplish here on earth. Now, rabbinic tradition is that Abraham was an idol maker. This is a man who made idols with his hand, and he encounters the one true God in such a way that he's willing to leave everything to go and follow him. He was a Gentile man living in the Ur of the Chaldeans, and this map shows Ur and his journey in obedience to God. The Abrahamic covenant is the covenant of decision. This is the moment that God begins to implement his plan to send his son to die for us on the cross. God looked for a man, and the purpose of the call, to be the vehicle of world redemption. Let's read Genesis 12:1-3. Now, the Lord had said to Abraham, get out of your country, away from your family, and away from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. And in you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. That's a pretty amazing covenant, isn't it? And it still holds true today. Now, if we look at Genesis 17 in verses 7 and 8, we're going to see the word everlasting 2 times. The first is the everlasting covenant that he has made with his people, Israel, and the second is the land as an everlasting possession. We know that he chose a people for himself to work out his redemptive plan. We know, too, that he chose a land for them to possess wherein he would work out his purposes. The map here, it shows the land that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and all of their descendants were promised. I would suggest they have not realized that yet. However, in order to remain in the land, they needed to be a righteous nation and not serve other gods, but they do. The Lord uproots them from their land in anger because they served other gods. He says in Deuteronomy 29:25-28, because they have forsaken the covenant of the Lord, God of their fathers, which he made with them when he brought them out of the land of Egypt. For they went and served other gods and worshipped them, and the Lord uprooted them from their land in anger, in wrath, and in great indignation, and cast them into another land, as it is this day. So, what is God doing now? Well, being true to his word, as an everlasting covenant, he's returning his people to the land. Many of us were alive and witnessed the fulfillment of Isaiah 66:8, where it says, "Who hath heard of such a thing? Who hath seen such a thing? Shall the earth be made forth in one day, or shall a nation be born at once? For as soon as Zion travailed, she brought forth her children." We saw the nation of Israel born in one day, and now God is returning his people, just like he said in Ezekiel 36:24-28. He's bringing them back to their own land. We see it happening right before our eyes, and the ICEJ has helped to bring more than 115,000 Jews back to Israel and helped to assimilate them into their homeland from all over the world. Then it says, he will sprinkle clean water on you, cleanse you from all filthiness and from those idols, and then you will dwell in the land that I gave your fathers. This is what we're seeing today. Now, it's important to address the question of what happens to the nations that God uses to judge his people Israel. Because their intention is evil, because it is always about the total destruction of the Jewish people, these nations will always fall under God's judgment. See how he said he was angry? The nations actually helped, but they did so with evil intent. In other words, they tried to wipe out his chosen people, and that made him exceedingly angry. God has chosen Jerusalem. It is his chosen place for his chosen people, and that is reflected even in the topography of the land, as well as in his word. Now, the letter Shin denotes God's name. In Deuteronomy 16:11 and 2 Chronicles, it says that God has chosen Jerusalem to place his name there. This topographical map of Jerusalem suggests the valleys are in a similar formation as the letter Shin. It's as if God has stamped his name on the land. Isn't that amazing? Now, just as a little sidebar here, Jesus was not a Christian. His mother Mary was not a Catholic, and his friend John, his cousin, was not a Baptist. They were all Jews living in Israel. Israel is where Jesus departed from, and that is where he is returning. God has put his name on the city of Jerusalem. That is why it is the epicenter of the world, and all the principalities, power, rulers, darkness of this world are coming against Jerusalem, Israel, and the Jews as a result. Now, in review, I would like to once again show you a quick video. It's just a short one, but it's an excellent video, and I'm just going to try and pop it up here. And this will give you a little bit of a review. It's from the Jerusalem Institute of Justice. Let's just go here. There we go. Okay, let's start.
issue of our time. Many have resorted to simply blaming one side or the other. But if we take the time to understand the history and correct our misconceptions, a potential path forward for the Palestinians begins to emerge. So let's start by trying to get the story straight and clear up 10 of the biggest misconceptions out there. Misconception number 1. Israel illegally stole land from the Palestinians. In 1947, the UN voted to give land to both the Jews and the Palestinians. The Jews accepted their partition and legally formed the State of Israel. The Palestinians rejected their partition and attacked. Even after losing the war, the Arabs still had most of the land from the UN ruling. Which leads us to misconception number 2. The surrounding Arab nations actually want to create a Palestinian state. So after the war, the West Bank and Gaza were controlled by Jordan and Egypt for 19 years. During that span, those governments never established a Palestinian state. Instead, they kept the land for their own use. Misconception number 3. The Arab nations want to solve the refugee crisis. Palestinians have settled in Arab nations throughout the Middle East. These nations could solve the crisis immediately by granting refugees equal rights, but instead, they refuse to let them vote, own land, or even study in public schools. Ironically, the only country to grant them full citizenship rights is Israel, which absorbed 156,000 Arabs after the 1948 war, and even today, Arabs hold seats in the Israeli government and Supreme Court. Misconception number 4. UN efforts are helping to solve the refugee crisis. The UN did step in to provide assistance to the Palestinian refugees, but instead of using their existing agency that helps resettle refugee populations around the world, the UN created UNRWA, which labels every Palestinian as a refugee until a Palestinian state is formed within the borders of Israel. This makes it more difficult for Palestinians to thrive in their host countries and locks them into perpetual refugee status, passing it on to their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, swelling the refugee population from 500,000 in 1949 to nearly 5 million today. As conditions worsened, the international aid started to pour in, which, incidentally, is misconception number 5. The solution is more money. Really? Western nations have given the Palestinians a ton of aid. Even taking inflation into account, they've been given 25 times more money per person than Europe was given to rebuild after World War II. Where's the stable economy? Where's the improved infrastructure? That money sure could have helped, but it was given to some leaders who had a different agenda, which brings us headlong into misconception number 6. Forming a state is the primary goal of top Palestinian leaders. All of this international aid did go to help ease one man's suffering, Yasser Arafat. After his death, accountants hired by Arafat's own family discovered secret investments worth more than $1 billion. That income stream would be threatened if a new state was formed, which gives leaders like Arafat, or Mahmoud Abbas for that matter, a billion-plus reasons to never actually sign a peace treaty. Which leads us to misconception number 7. Israel has a true peace partner. In the year 2000, desperate for a resolution, the Israelis elected Prime Minister Ehud Barak with a mandate to make peace with the Palestinians. Barak offered Yasser Arafat 94% of the land he demanded, except Jerusalem. Arafat flatly refused. President Clinton blamed the failure of the best chance at peace in 60 years squarely on Yasser Arafat. Which brings up perhaps the most common misconception of all. Number 8. Israel just needs to give up land for peace. The last time Israel tried this was in 2005. They forced thousands of Jewish settlers out of Gaza, and in exchange, the Palestinian leaders promised peace. But when the Israelis moved out, the Palestinians voted Hamas in. Yep, they elected a terrorist organization who, since taking power, has fired more than 10,000 rockets into Israel. Surprised? Then you've probably bought into misconception number 9. Most Palestinians want a lasting peace with Israel. Some Palestinians do, but they are a minority. For 60 years, Palestinian educational leaders have fed their children a steady diet of hate, idolizing suicide bombers and celebrating death right in the classroom. And finally, misconception number 10. Giving the Palestinians a state now is the only solution to their suffering. This has been the only approach tried for the last 60 years. But these are people we're talking about. and waiting until they have a state to give them equal rights has only made things worse. Currently, Israel is the only nation to grant full rights to the Palestinians within their borders. But by granting them equal rights in every nation where they live, we could immediately increase the quality of life for every Palestinian. Let's be honest, these misconceptions have concealed potential solutions. When we take time to clear up confusion and face reality, we begin to uncover the truth. And that's when real progress towards justice can begin.
I thought it would be worthwhile for us to take a look at that particular video because it's such a good one. And it does give us a good review, doesn't it, of exactly what we've been talking about so far in today's webinar. It's important for us to remember that when we take a review like that, it's just so that you can kind of clearly determine what your thoughts are on all of the different subjects we've discussed. Now we should move forward and take a little bit of a look at to how we respond as Christians. For all, I mean, there is an awful lot of information, and really and truly, that little 5-minute video is probably one of the best I've seen so far to talk about what's been happening. So, how do we respond as Christians? Well, I think personally that if it's important to Father God, it should be important to us. And here's what God says. He says in Isaiah 41, comfort ye, my people, saith your God. In Psalm 122:6, he says, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. They shall prosper that love thee. This is the mandate as Christians that we've been following at the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem. In fact, they are our founding scriptures. In January 2014, our ICEJ Canada National Director, Donna Holbrook, was invited to be part of Prime Minister Stephen Harper, his delegation on his first trip to Israel. And during that incredible trip, Prime Minister Harper made a historic speech to the Knesset. And there's this particular paragraph that I think is worthwhile repeating. It says that the understanding that it is right to support Israel because after generations of persecution, the Jewish people deserve their own homeland and deserve to live in safety and peacefully in that homeland. Let me repeat that Canada supports Israel fundamentally because it is right to do so. This is a very Canadian trait. To do something for no other reason than it is the right thing to do, even when there is no immediate reward or threat to ourselves. On many occasions, Canadians have even gone so far as to bleed and die to defend the freedom of others in far-off lands. And therefore, through fire and water, Canada will stand with you. I was so proud of Prime Minister Harper after that speech. I hope that you were able to hear the whole thing. In Israel, they loved him and they called him a rock star. Now, on the other hand, have you heard about this particular campaign? BDS, boycotts, divestments, and sanctions. It has been gaining a lot of ground in some mainline denominations who are largely misguided by anti-Israel propaganda. Doesn't it make you wonder why Israel is so singled out and countries like Syria don't even get mentioned, even though they've murdered over 100,000 of their own people? We have a document on our website that's a bit of tongue-in-cheek, it really is, but it tells you what you should do if you truly want to boycott Israel. And it starts with, remove all Intel, Pentium, and Celeron computer processing chips from your personal computer. Antivirus software and personal firewalls must be removed. Discard all mobile phones. Turn off your voicemail service and delete all your recorded messages. Don't use Facebook. Many of the applications are Israeli developed. Do not use on-demand TV. And for heaven's sakes, don't get any of the new health and medical benefits such as the camera pill that we've received from Israel. It's pretty absurd, isn't it? You want to talk absurd? Let's talk SodaStream. This is really kind of crazy because this shows you how silly the whole thing is. SodaStream's main, I guess what we would call it, their manufacturing facility is located in Judea and Samaria. It employs 1,300 workers, 950 of whom are Arabs, and of that 950, 450 of them are Israeli, and 500 are Palestinian. They also have 350 Israeli Jews working there. The salaries and work benefits, workers confirm this, are equal for all of them, and they have for comparable jobs, regardless of their ethnicity or their citizenship. The factory secures Israeli work permits for its Palestinian employees, as well as rides to and from their home. There are no job opportunities in the West Bank, hardly at all, and those that do exist pay no more than about $400 to $500 a month. SodaStream pays triple those sums. If one were to take a tour around the SodaStream plant, one would hear Palestinian workers extolling the virtues of working for SodaStream. The overwhelming impression is of a workforce that is truly invested in what they're doing. They love working there, and they don't get what the fuss is all about. So now you know why I call it absurd. Anyways, let's talk about what we can do as Christians. One of the things I think we can do is we can do a boycott for Israel. We can buy Israeli goods. We can use things such as a Hava skincare products or buy some Nayot shoes. I mean, we can buy all sorts of things from Israel. Just look for the barcode 729, and that means it's made in Israel. That's one way we can support. Another thing we can do is we can teach our children about shared values and freedoms. We need to make a point of this so that our children, when they hear mainstream anti-Israel propaganda, they're going to know it's fabricated often, and they're going to have a better view, I think, of where Israel really stands. They're very much like we are, you know. When we see things like this ad ran in the Vancouver transit system, and this kind of represents the misinformation that abounds. It shows the land that supposedly was Palestine. Well, of course it was Palestine because that's what it was named until 1948 when Israel became a state. And it shows, of course, the UN partition plan where they were offered their own land and Israel would have their own land and so on. And then it shows, of course, Israel eating up all the poor Palestinian lands. It's just so fabricated. I'm very happy to report that the Toronto Transit System so far has rejected posting these ads, but now they're being taken to court. So we'll see what happens. This slide indicates the truth. And yet, you know, they're continuing to watch the land of Israel shrink. And if John Kerry has his way, it might shrink even more. We have to learn what the truth is, and we need to speak up about it when we do find out. I would highly recommend you downloading the ICEJ News app if you have a smartphone. That will give you right into your cell phone the latest stories coming out of the Middle East. Or you can sign up and get the daily emails. They give the Israeli news and the Middle Eastern news from a Christian perspective. The other thing we can do is when there are rallies that are happening in our areas to support Israel, we need to join in. And also, the media is often biased against Israel, and the Palestinians have had a very effective PR strategy. So don't always believe what you hear. Dig out the truth. There's a great organization called Honest Reporting, and you can look them up online. They often will confront the media with stories that are not true. The other thing that I would mention, and that is Facebook. I'm not a big Facebook program person, but whoops, I will say one thing, and that is that Facebook allows us the opportunity in social media to get our viewpoints out. I don't know whether you would have a Twitter thing or just whatever you have, but whatever you have, use it to spread the truth when you find it. And the next time you come to Israel, consider coming with us. We love bringing Christians to Israel. We really do. And when you arrive there, you're going to feel like you've just come home. I guarantee it. The Bible comes alive to you when you visit Israel. It's just incredible. We want to get young people there. ICEJ has got a scholarship available for young adults 17 to 30 years old, and they can apply for it. And of course, there's competition because we only have 6 slots per year. But then they get to go to Israel and they experience a hands on mission type tour in the summer, along with others. It's not just our scholarship recipients. All young adults are invited to attend the Arise trip in Israel. And it's basically what you would call a hands-on trip. AriseGeneration.org has a ton of information on it, and I would highly recommend that to young people everywhere. We also have educational seminars and, of course, webinars like this one, where Christians can tune in and find out really what God has to say about these issues, especially current events. It's also good to understand our Hebraic roots as Christians and our role as believers. One thing we can all do, and that is that we can get involved. God is a covenant keeping God, and Israel is back in the land for this final chapter in history, and we are living in it, people. She's constantly threatened. We need to pray. ICEJ has got the Isaiah 62 prayer initiative, and if you go further into the website and just do a search for prayer, it will pop up and give you the current prayer chart for that particular month. It's important that we pray for Israel and the peace of Jerusalem. Make sure your church stands with Israel. A lot of the churches are thinking that somehow the church has replaced Israel, and that is not true. You have to make sure our nation stands with Israel. Yes, I know we're really blessed right now because our government supports Israel, but that can change at the next election. So we need to stand up and make our thoughts and our attitudes known. 7 ways to support Israel? Well, be active, speak up, buy Israeli products, teach your friends and family about Israel, visit Israel, attend a pro-Israel rally, protest bias in the media, and even fly the Israeli flag. We have a brand new television program that is now airing on Daystar Television, Daystar Canada. And you can check on their website, Canada Daystar. I think it is .org or .com, I'm not sure, but you can look it up and you can find out what channel it's on in your area. They're right across the country. The program is excellent, and it's also on our website under ICEJ Canada TV. Make the embassy in Jerusalem your most important resource. ICEJ has this beautiful building, and through ICEJ, you can help bless Israel. You can increase the Christian support for Israel and help educate churches on their scriptural mandate towards Israel by volunteering. You can come to the Feast of Tabernacles with us every fall. We have an incredible trip that brings, oh my goodness, somewhere in the neighborhood of 5,000 to 8,000 Christians from around the world to Jerusalem for that incredible feast. ICEJ Canada is a registered Canadian charity. And I need to tell you that when you send a donation to ICEJ Canada and you designate where you'd like it to go, 100% of those funds that we receive will go to that designation. I want to thank you so much for your time and attention today with this webinar. And I want to encourage you, if you have any questions whatsoever, please email me at jude@icejcanada.org. Thank you again, and God bless you and keep you. You know, I believe that God blesses everyone who blesses Israel. So, in the name of Yeshua, I bless you for your interest. Amen and amen.